That fence isn't regulation height. That's the first sentence Margot Bellamy ever said to me. No hello, no welcome to the neighborhood, just a finger pointed at my back gate and a voice that sounded like it was used to being obeyed. I hadn't even finished moving the boxes inside. My daughter Emily was trying to carry a lamp that kept sliding out of her arms, and I was halfway through unloading tools from the bed of my truck. Then she appeared, clipboard tucked tight against a pink blazer, white heels crunching down the gravel as if she owned it. She didn't, not yet. My name's Daniel Rourke. This land, these trees, that porch swing, even the overgrown rose bushes lining the walkway, they were all my grandfather's before they were mine. He left them to me after he passed last spring. I didn't move here to make trouble. I came to honor the only man who ever believed in me. Before I go any further, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe in standing your ground, hit that subscribe button. This story gets real fast. See, to Margot and her precious Lakeside Residential Council, I'm not a neighbor. I'm a warning. A man with a daughter, a pickup truck, and too much independence. The kind of guy who doesn't decorate his mailbox with faux copper swirls or mulch his garden bed the approved shade of bark brown. But this land, it means something to me. Not because it's pretty, not because it's big, because every summer since I was 7, my grandfather would bring me here. We'd sit under the old bent cypress tree behind the garage, whittling wood and listening to the lake slap against the dock. He called that tree the Sentinel. Said it had watched over 5 generations of Rourkes. After the funeral, that's where I spread some of his ashes, beneath the Sentinel, near the base where the bark peels and smells like pine and smoke. So no, I wasn't just going to tear down my back fence because it was 2 inches too tall, not without asking why. Margot didn't like that. You're required to submit all changes in writing to the council, she said, flipping her clipboard. You'll find the architectural guidelines in your welcome packet, pages 9 through 21. I didn't make a change, I told her. The fence has been here since before you bought your first set of pearls. That was my first mistake, assuming facts mattered more than power. 2 days later, I got my first violation notice in the mail. Improper perimeter fencing, fine, $125, 0 cents, compliance deadline, 10 days. Emily rolled her eyes when I read it out loud. Are we seriously getting charged for not asking permission to keep a fence? I tried to laugh. I think this is their version of a welcome basket. But I'll be honest, I didn't feel like laughing. Not when I looked out at the Sentinel, branches sagging over the edge of our yard, and thought about how much this place cost my grandfather. He'd fought tooth and nail to keep this land out of developers' hands, built the first dock himself, lived modest so we'd always have a place that was ours. And now, a woman with a clipboard and a monthly newsletter was threatening it. I paid the fine. I didn't want war. Not then, not over $125, 0 cents. That was my second mistake. Because after that, the notices kept coming. A citation for leaving a non-approved vehicle visible in the driveway. A warning about uncontained vegetation near the sidewalk. Translation, a rose bush with thorns. Even a letter suggesting Emily's small garden boxes were unsightly and possibly invasive. She cried over that one. Those tomatoes were the first thing she'd planted after we moved in. They were her way of staying connected to her mom, to something hopeful. And yet, each week, Margot's tone got colder. Colin Drexler, her so-called enforcement officer, started driving by more often, taking pictures, parking down the road and watching us like we were criminals. This wasn't about fences anymore, it was about control, and I wasn't about to let them turn my daughter's home into a battlefield. But I had no idea what kind of war was coming, because next time they showed up, it wouldn't be with a clipboard. It'd be with a pistol. The first time they showed up with a clipboard, the second time with a gun. But before we get there, let me tell you what happened in between, because that's where the war was quietly declared. It started with the truck. My work truck's a beat-up gray Ford F-250 with my old company's name still faintly visible on the door, Rourke Construction. It's not pretty, but it runs, and it's the same truck I used to help build wheelchair ramps for veterans back when Dad got sick. So yeah, it matters, but according to the council, it was an eyesore. 3 days after I paid the fence fine, I found a neon orange sticker slapped across the windshield. Vehicle, in violation, subject to towing in 48 hours. Below it was the familiar stamp, Lakeside Residential Council, Enforcement Committee. Emily saw it first. They can't tow it, can they? It's our driveway. I peeled the sticker off slowly, trying not to show her how tight my jaw had gotten. They can try. I checked the bylaws that night. Yes, the same 21-page manual Margot waved around like it was scripture. Nowhere did it say personal vehicles registered to the homeowner had to be hidden from view. But there it was, buried in a footnote on page 16. All visible vehicles must meet aesthetic standards as outlined by the Design Review Board. In other words, they made the rules vague enough to bend, then sharp enough to cut. I wrote a formal response, polite, professional, quoted their own handbook, asked for clarification. No reply, just another notice 2 days later, this one with a $75.00 aesthetic penalty. Colin Drexler started parking his SUV near the cul-de-sac. At first I thought it was coincidence, but then he started snapping pictures of our yard, of my truck, of Emily. Do you think he's taking those for HOA records? She asked one morning, her voice too quiet for a kid her age. No, I told her, I think he's trying to scare us. But fear's a funny thing. It doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in through small humiliations, like how I started backing the truck down the side of the house at night just to avoid another fine, like how Emily stopped tending her tomato plants because she caught someone stepping on them. We never saw who, but we both knew. It wasn't just pettiness anymore, it was personal. And yet, what could I do? Call the police? For what? Pedal damage, suspicious glances, a badly worded bylaw? They'd laugh me off the line. So I did what men like my grandfather taught me to do. I started keeping records. Every letter, every fine, every photo. I started a folder on my kitchen table labeled LRC in thick black marker. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I'd need it. Then came the sprinkler incident. It was a Thursday afternoon, hot, dry. Emily had dragged the old lawn sprinkler out and was dancing through the spray, laughing like she used to back when her mom was still around. We heard a car door slam. I looked up. Margot was standing on the curb, heels planted in the grass like she was staking a claim. She didn't say a word, just pulled out her phone and started filming. Emily froze. "Hey," I barked, walking toward her. "Is there a problem?" "You're wasting water," Margot said, not lowering the phone. "That's a violation of the conservation clause." "You mean the one that's voluntary during non-drought periods?" She turned the phone sideways. "Smile for the board, Mr. Rourke." I didn't smile, but I also didn't back down. "You want a video? Here's mine." I raised my own phone and started recording her right back. For a flicker of a second, her expression faltered, just enough for me to see something behind that smug posture. Nerves. She left without another word. Later that night, Emily asked me why Margot hated us so much. I didn't have a neat answer, but I sat her down, pulled out an old photo from the kitchen drawer, me and Grandpa sitting under the sentinel tree, covered in sawdust and mosquito bites. "She doesn't hate us," I said. "She fears what we represent. People who don't bow." Emily traced her finger across the edges of the photo. "Then maybe it's time we stop playing nice." That's when I realized she wasn't just scared anymore. She was learning. And so was I. The clipboard was only the beginning. Emily was right, it was time we stopped playing nice, but before I made any big moves, I needed to know who, if anyone, was still human behind those cold boardroom stares. And that's when I noticed Pauline Mercer. The next HOA meeting was held in the clubhouse, as usual. Cheap chairs in neat rows, lukewarm coffee in paper cups, and a podium so clean it looked unused. Margot stood front and center like a senator on a power trip, flanked by Colin Drexler and a few loyalists nodding on command. But off to the side, behind a stack of printed agendas, sat Pauline, quiet, composed, and utterly unreadable. I'd seen her around before, always gardening, always alone. She had a small lavender patch outside her condo that somehow never made it into the HOA's long list of violations. When Margot mentioned my non-compliance with ongoing community beautification efforts, I scanned the room, not for support, just to see if anyone would meet my eyes. They didn't. Except Pauline. For less than a second, her gaze flicked toward me, then down. Her hands were folded, but her thumbs fidgeted, a small motion, nervous, like someone holding something in. After the meeting, as the board members gathered to pat themselves on the back, I made my way to the back door, and there she was, standing alone by the coat rack. "Mrs. Mercer," I said, keeping my tone even, "appreciate you sitting through that circus." She gave a polite smile. "I sit through all of them." "You always this quiet?" "Only when it's safer that way." That stopped me. Not the words, the way she said them. Like someone who'd learned the hard way what happens when you speak up. I nodded toward the exit. "You ever get fined for those lavender bushes?" She hesitated, then smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "No, but only because they think I'm too harmless to matter." "Maybe they're wrong." She didn't answer, just gathered her papers and walked out, but she left her agenda behind, on purpose, I think. Folded inside was a handwritten note in tidy cursive. "They've done this before, you're not the first, keep everything." I stared at the note for a long time. I didn't show it to Emily, not yet, but I slipped it into my LRC folder and underlined one word. Before. Pauline had confirmed it. This wasn't personal, it was a pattern. 2 days later, Colin showed up again. Not at my house, this time he was knocking on my neighbor's door. Mr. Delgado, a retired mechanic who mostly kept to himself. Emily and I were just coming back from the store when we saw them arguing in the driveway. Delgado was waving a letter. "This is harassment. I've lived here 30 years. Colin pointed at the garage. "It's unauthorized structure expansion. It violates." "It's a tool shelf. You people think you own us now?" I started walking toward them. Colin saw me coming, muttered something, and walked off. Delgado turned to me, shaking his head. "They fine you yet for breathing wrong?" "Close enough," I said. "You gonna fight it?" He scoffed. "I'm too old for wars." But Emily wasn't. That night she printed flyers. Plain ones, no colors, just bold black type. Had enough of HOA harassment? Let's talk. We taped one to the inside of our front window, another on the community board at the clubhouse, one slipped under Pauline's door. That's when things got strange. The next morning, Emily found a manila envelope on our porch, no return address. Inside were photos, faded, grainy, some nearly 20 years old. One showed a man's garage being dismantled. Another, a woman crying on her front lawn, while Colin stood nearby, arms crossed. Paperclipped to the back was a single line. "Not all of us forget." I didn't know who sent it, but I knew what it meant. This wasn't just harassment, this was a cycle, and if Margot and her people were hiding something, they'd done it well. Until now. That night, as I sat at the table flipping through the photos, Emily came downstairs. She looked at the stack in my hands, then at the sentinel tree, swaying in the wind outside the window. "We're not just fighting for us, are we?" "No," I said, "we're fighting for everyone they've silenced." And somewhere, I hoped, Pauline was listening. We kept the manila envelope hidden, tucked behind the family cookbooks in the kitchen, next to Grandma Rourke's cinnamon biscuit recipe. Emily thought that was poetic, truth hiding next to comfort, she called it. I just knew we weren't ready to show our cards. Not yet. But someone knew we had it. Because that Friday night, they stopped pretending. It was late. Emily was upstairs, headphones on, probably rewatching one of her endless documentaries. I had just stepped outside to unload a few lumber planks from the truck, left over from repairing the dock steps. The porch light buzzed overhead, casting long shadows onto the gravel drive. That's when I heard it. A low crunch of tires on loose stone. Not hurried, not slow, just deliberate. I turned, expecting to see a neighbor. Instead, I saw Colin Drexler's SUV pulling in without an invitation. The engine stayed running, headlights off. He stepped out, calm, casual, except for the heavy black jacket he didn't usually wear. "Evenin'," he said, voice flat. I didn't answer, just kept my hand on the plank and my eyes on him. He took a step forward, then another, stopping a good 10 feet away. "Heard you've been snooping, asking questions?" "You heard right," I said. Colin glanced toward the porch, toward Emily's bedroom light visible through the upstairs curtain. That was the moment my instincts shifted. This wasn't HOA business. This was personal. "You might want to cool it," he said, pulling something from inside his coat. I didn't blink. I didn't move, but every muscle in my body locked up. A pistol. Black, no words, no badge, just cold metal and a smirk. He didn't aim it, didn't need to, just held it low, angled toward the gravel as if it were some extension of his hand. I said nothing. He waited. I could hear my own heartbeat. Steady, not from fear, but clarity. "You threaten my daughter," I said finally. "You're not going to like who you're messing with." He grunted. "This isn't a threat, Rourke. Just a reminder. This neighborhood plays by rules. Step out of line, bad things happen." Then he left. Just like that. Back into the SUV, gone into the dark. I stood there for a minute, two. The silence after was heavier than the confrontation. Not rage, wait. Inside, I double-checked every lock. Then I walked out to the shed and retrieved the old hunting camera Grandpa kept. I mounted it under the porch eave, angled low across the driveway. Then I wrote everything down. Time, make, model, description. The way his left foot scuffed on the walk. The way he looked at Emily's window. And I added it all to the folder. The next morning, Emily noticed something. Did someone step on the tomato beds again? I followed her outside. Sure enough, fresh tracks, deep heel prints, boots. She looked up at me. They know we're not scared. So now they're trying to make us. No, I said. Now they're showing who they really are. Later that day, we went to the local hardware store. I bought new motion lights, extra locks, a no soliciting sign, and, just to be thorough, a cheap dash cam. The cashier raised an eyebrow. Security upgrade? More like truth insurance. We got back just in time to see Pauline walking her dog near our street. I called out, "You have a minute?" She paused, glanced around, then nodded. Inside, I showed her the photos from the manila envelope, the note, and what had happened the night before. Her face turned pale. Her hand trembled just slightly. She said nothing for a while, just stared at one of the older photos, one showing Colin laughing while a family's fence was being torn down. She finally whispered, "That woman in the photo. That's the Carmichaels. They moved out the year I joined the board." She cried for days. "You knew?" She nodded. "We all did. But no one said a word. Not after what happened to Tom." "Tom?" Her eyes flicked toward the window. "He tried to push back once. They made it look like he violated code. They took everything." That night, I made a new folder. A digital one this time, password protected. I labeled it Sentinel. Because that tree didn't just represent legacy anymore. It represented watchfulness. And from now on, so would we. After Pauline left, I sat in the kitchen staring at the words she'd used. They took everything. Not fined, not harassed, took. It was the first time this stopped feeling like neighborhood politics and started feeling like something darker. Organized, intentional. The HOA wasn't just overreaching, they were dismantling lives. Quietly, efficiently, one violation at a time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made me sit up straighter. I kept thinking about my grandfather, how he always said, "The real power isn't what they show you, it's what they hide." I remembered something else too, a story he told me when I was a kid, about an old lockbox hidden beneath the floorboards in the shed. Just in case someone ever forgets the truth, he'd said with a wink. At the time, I thought he meant fishing gear or old newspaper clippings. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I waited until Emily left for school, then grabbed my gloves, a flashlight, and the old pry bar from the toolbox. The sun had barely cut through the trees. Dew clung to the grass, the sentinel's branches creaked in the breeze. Low and hollow, like it knew something I didn't. The shed was colder than it should have been. Dust floated in the narrow beams of light cutting through the wood slats. I pulled the workbench aside and knelt down, brushing away cobwebs and stray nails. The floorboard creaked differently in one spot. Thicker, heavier. It took 3 careful tugs with the pry bar before the plank gave way. Beneath it, wrapped in canvas and tied with old rope, was a small, rust-colored lockbox. My hands shook. Not with fear, but something close to reverence. It still had his handwriting on a tag. "Doctor for Eyes That Remember." I carried it inside and sat it on the kitchen table. The lock had rusted over. Took me 15 minutes, a flathead screwdriver, and a hammer to snap it open. Inside were 3 things. A yellowed manila folder labeled Bellamy Pre-Board Records. Small cassette tape with the words 1989 Lakeside Vote in faded ink. And a handwritten letter folded in thirds addressed simply, "To whoever finds this." I opened the letter first. "If you're reading this, it means they've gone too far. You need to know, Margot wasn't elected, she was installed. The vote in '89 was rigged. Colin was her leverage. She's been protecting something. Or someone. I tried to stop it once. They threatened me, they threatened you, so I built this place into a vault. If they ever come for what's ours, you don't fight them with noise, you fight them with proof." Grandpa, my fingers curled around the edges of the page. I looked at the folder. Inside, photocopied bank slips, old meeting minutes, even a signed memo suggesting land use codes had been deliberately rewritten to force out 4 families during the early '90s. Every one of them owners of unregulated parcels near the lake. One name came up again and again. Margot Bellamy. Dropped into the chair, the weight of it all settling in my chest like wet cement. This wasn't about a fence, or tomatoes, or the truck. This was a cover-up, 3 decades old, rooted in money, land grabs, and fear. I called Emily out of school early. When she came in and saw the box, her eyes widened. "What is that?" "Legacy," I said, "and leverage." We sat side by side going through each document, lining them across the table like puzzle pieces. At one point, Emily picked up the cassette and squinted. "Where do we even find something to play this?" I hadn't thought of that, but I remembered the old stereo my grandfather kept in the crawl space, never used, just stored with a bunch of his records. So we went down. The crawl space was musty, claustrophobic, and the light bulb above us flickered like it hated being disturbed. Emily held her nose as I dug through the boxes. The stereo was there, half wrapped in newspaper next to a crate labeled "Tools Not for HOA Use." I chuckled. Back upstairs, we popped the tape in. A hiss. Then silence. Then a voice, male, calm, grainy. "This is an unofficial record of the Lakeside Board vote, June 1989. Present are Margot Bellamy, Colin Drexler, and..." The audio crackled, then laughter, then the sound of someone whispering, "They won't find this." But we did, and I planned to use it. Emily replayed the cassette 4 times that night. Each time she'd pause and scribble something in the notebook, seamless. Turn models, names, fragments of whispered threats. The tape was old and warped, but certain phrases came through with gut-punch clarity. "We need Colin on the board, he keeps people compliant. The Rourke plot's untouchable unless we rewrite Section B. Do you think the boy will ever come back here?" I didn't sleep. Neither did she. By morning, we had enough scribbled notes to fill half a binder, and one thing was painfully clear. This wasn't about keeping lawns tidy or fences neat. It was about control and land. Always the land. At breakfast, Emily said quietly, "They never expected us to outlive their lie." That hit me harder than I expected. We spent the day going through the rest of the documents from the box. Some of them were personal letters, handwritten correspondence between board members. Margot's handwriting showed up more than once, her cursive sharp and overconfident. She signed one memo with a flourish and a line that read, "Delgado's lot is next, don't ask, just rezone." Mr. Delgado, the same neighbor Colin had barked at 2 parts ago. That wasn't just policy, that was targeting. Emily started building a timeline on the wall with index cards and thumbtacks. Every family forced out, every unexplained zoning change, every fine over $500, 0 cents. And slowly a pattern emerged. Names started repeating, the same 5 families, each one owning property that backed onto the lake. She circled them in red: Rourke, Carmichael, Bessler, Lang, Delgado. I stared at the wall and felt the skin on the back of my neck tighten. "I'm clearing the lakefront," I said. Emily nodded. "And we're the last ones standing." Outside, the sentinel tree rustled in the wind. A single branch brushed against the porch roof with a rhythmic tap, 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 like it was trying to remind us of something. "They erased everyone else," she whispered. "They just never figured out how to get rid of you." I walked to the kitchen and poured myself some coffee. My hands weren't shaking, but there was a slow, quiet anger building in my chest. Not rage, something colder, focused. It was time to bring Pauline in. That afternoon, we left a note on her door. Just 4 words. We found the box. She showed up less than an hour later, lavender gloves still on, her eyes flicking around like a cornered animal. Inside, she sat at the table without a word while Emily laid out the documents. At first, Pauline didn't speak, she just stared. Then slowly, her hand reached for one paper in particular, a copy of a vote ledger from 1992. Her name was scribbled in the margin next to a board approval to acquire lakefront easement rights. "I remember this," she said softly. "They told me it was a drainage expansion project." "You signed off on it?" I asked, not accusing, just clarifying. She hesitated, then nodded. "We all did, except Tom. He's the only one who said no." Emily spoke up. "Tom's the one you said they punished?" Pauline's face stiffened. "Yes. He lost his job, wife left, they audited him, said it was his own fault, but we all knew, and we all stayed quiet." She looked up at me, and for the first time she didn't seem fragile. She looked furious, with herself. "You were a kid," she said. "I used to see you helping your grandfather plant those cypress trees. I remember thinking, that boy doesn't belong here, he belongs to here. And I let them plan how to take it." She stood, gently smoothed the crease in her jacket, and added, "You should know, Margot keeps the real records off-site, in her guest house. There's a cabinet in the back office, locked but not alarmed." I blinked. "How do you know?" Her eyes met mine. "Because I filed them for her." Emily leaned forward. "Can you get us in?" Pauline exhaled slowly. "I can do better than that. I still have a copy of the key." It was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "We don't need a war, we need a spotlight." Emily smiled. "Then let's light it up." And just like that, we weren't alone anymore. Pauline's copy of the key was old, worn, and taped to the inside of a Christmas card, one addressed to M. Bellamy with fondness, P. I didn't ask what that relationship used to be. Whatever trust once existed between them was long gone. "You'll want to go at night," she said, adjusting her lavender gloves. "She only uses the guest house during the day, when her husband's out, but the files stay there." I waited a beat. "You're sure the cabinet hasn't moved?" She nodded. "Back office, left of the desk, faux mahogany. Keeps it locked but never alarmed. She's arrogant like that." Emily was already typing up a checklist. "We'll need a pocket recorder, gloves, flashlight, 2 phones, one recording, one on backup. And I'm not letting you go alone." I gave her the look, the one dads give their kids when it's time to draw the line. She didn't blink. "Dad, if something happens, who's going to back you up? You need someone fast, someone quiet, someone who's not 6'4" and built like drywall." I grinned despite myself. "Fine, but you listen to me the first time I say run." Deal. We parked 2 blocks away. Walked in under the cover of dusk, just 2 silhouettes skirting the hedge line, flashlights off. Margot's guest house sat behind a wrought iron gate, tidy and manicured like something from a real estate ad. Every window glowed warm yellow, but the backside, where the office was dark. Emily picked the side window lock with a tension wrench she bought online. Not her first time testing boundaries, I guess. Inside smelled like expensive linen and lemon oil. We moved quickly, stepping carefully over the creaking floorboards. Emily led the way, quiet as a whisper. The office door opened easily. The cabinet stood exactly where Pauline said it would. I pulled on gloves and cracked the lock open with a thin pry bar. Not brute force, just enough leverage. Inside were 4 black binders, thick, labeled in gold. Amendments, transfers, enforcement, financials. Emily opened the transfers binder first. Her breath caught. Land documents, all stamped by city officials, all showing property handovers. Every family from our wall, Carmichaels, Besslers, Langs, marked with phrases like non-compliant surrender or voluntary exit. Voluntary my ass. Then we hit gold. At the back of the binder was a contract, unsigned but dated 2 weeks from now, marked. Proposed acquisition, Rourke parcel, transfer to Lakeside Holdings, LLC. Emily turned to me, stunned. "They already filed the paperwork. They're planning to take our land." I scanned the document. The LLC listed had a single member, Colin Drexler. It wasn't just Margot. It never was. She was the shield. Colin was the knife. I opened the financials binder and found a spreadsheet showing payouts. Money funneled through HOA project budgets into contractor groups. One line stood out. Security consultant retainer $12,000 0 cents. Next to it, Colin's signature. I snapped photos of everything, one by one. We recorded a quick video walkthrough, time-stamped, documented. Emily whispered, "This is enough to bury them." But just as I closed the cabinet, we heard the front door slam. Voices. "Margot." And someone else. Emily's eyes locked on mine. I motioned toward the side hallway. We slipped out the back door, down the garden slope, and ducked beneath the trellis. Just before we cleared the hedges, Emily tapped my shoulder and held up something small and silver. A flash drive. "I found it in the drawer," she said, labeled HOA Archive Active Files. We didn't speak until we were back in the car. Both of us breathing hard but laughing now, nervous, electric. It wasn't just about holding our ground anymore. We had leverage. Real, undeniable leverage. Back home, we backed up every file, every photo, every recording into 3 separate drives. One went into a lockbox under the sentinel tree, one to a lawyer I'd worked with years ago, and one that stayed with Emily, because she'd earned it. Later that night, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the cypress tree swaying gently in the dark. Grandpa used to say, "You can outwait a storm, but not a lie." The storm was here, but this time we were the lightning. By morning, the flash drive was copied, encrypted, and stored in 3 places. Emily even uploaded a secure folder to the cloud under the name Sentinel Backup _1. Her idea, not mine. She didn't just inherit my stubborn streak, she refined it. We had the proof, the binders, the photos, the voice recordings, the secret transfer documents tying our land to Collins LLC. But evidence means nothing without exposure. If we took it straight to the board, they'd spin it. If we went to the police without traction, it'd stall. We needed the story to tell itself. I poured coffee and started making calls. The first was to David Tran, a local investigative journalist I used to do remodel work for back when I ran Rourke Construction. The kind of guy who could smell fraud like a bloodhound. He answered on the second ring. "Danny Rourke," he said, "you still laying tile or digging graves?" "Bit of both," I said. "Got a story for you. HOA corruption, land theft, forged votes, with receipts." There was a pause. "You serious?" "As a pistol in your driveway, and I've got files you'll want to see." We met that afternoon, not in public. Pauline let us use her garden shed. Lavender still fresh in the air. Emily handled the drive, I handled the pitch. David flipped through everything, photos, documents, audio, video. His expression shifted from curiosity to silence. "Sweet hell," he muttered, holding up the transfer doc. "This ties Colin to everything, and this vote log, it proves the board never had the authority to rewrite those zoning sections." "It gets better," Emily said. She handed him the flash drive. "Those are the current files, auto-updated. We found them in Margot's guest house." David leaned back. "How close to the fire are you willing to stand?" I looked at Emily, then back at him. "We didn't come this far to roast marshmallows." He nodded. "Let me make a few calls. I know a state attorney who's been trying to crack down on HOA racketeering. If this checks out, she'll move." Before he left, I asked, "How long before it goes public?" "Soon as I get confirmation on these records, it'll be on the front page. But if you want it to land like a hammer, let it hit in front of an audience." That's when the idea clicked. The board had an open HOA forum scheduled for the following Thursday, usually a snooze fest about lawn drainage and dog leash lengths. But what if that meeting turned into something else? A reveal, a reckoning. I started printing. 25 color packets, summarized evidence, maps, and screenshots, each one labeled confidential, community review only. Just enough to rattle cages, not overwhelm. Meanwhile, Emily was working another angle. She found a local advocacy group called NEST, Neighbors for Ethical Standards in Townships. She contacted them, sent a preview of the evidence. They emailed back in all caps, "This is exactly what we fight for." They offered to attend the meeting and observe, quietly, legally, with press lanyards. The trap wasn't just legal, it was strategic. Let Margot speak first, let her recite her usual lines about community pride and structure, then drop the evidence, page by page, clip by clip. Let the room turn on its own. But we needed one more thing, a voice from inside. Pauline. She agreed, not easily, not comfortably. But when she said, "I owe this neighborhood the truth," I knew she'd found her moment. Thursday arrived fast. Emily and I wore the same clothes we used to plant tomatoes in because if we were going to stand for something, it was going to be as ourselves. Right before we left, she stopped under the sentinel tree, looked up at it, then down at the porch where we'd hidden the first backup drive. "You think he'd be proud?" she asked. I placed my hand on the bark, the old ridges rough and cool. "I think he's watching." We got in the truck and drove to the meeting. Quiet, focused. It wasn't war drums. It was the sound of truth clearing its throat. The HOA meeting was still 3 days away, but Margot must have sensed something shifting, because Monday morning we got company. It started with a letter taped to our door, not mailed, not folded, just taped there like a warning. "You are in violation of Articles 14C, 15B, and 17. Non-compliant materials, unauthorized modifications, and improper use of shared resources. Cease and desist all activities pending further notice." The best part? It wasn't even signed. Emily read it out loud, then held it up like a trophy. "They're panicking." "Yeah," I said, "but panicked people do stupid things." By noon, a city inspector showed up. Clipboard, khakis, overly friendly smile. "I'm here on an anonymous tip," he said. "Concerns about the property structure and septic compliance." Emily laughed from the porch swing. "Is that code for 'we made you uncomfortable'?" He shrugged, trying not to look embarrassed. "I've got to log the visit. Mind if I take a few photos?" "Knock yourself out," I said, unlocking the side gate. "But do me a favor. When you're done, take a picture of that tree over there, the one with the truth buried under it." He blinked. Sure." He left 15 minutes later. Found nothing, logged nothing. I made sure to get it in writing. By evening, Emily's school received an email expressing concern about a disruptive home environment. The school counselor called me directly. She was polite, careful with her words. "Mr. Rourke, it's just that these kinds of reports, when they come anonymously, we have to take them seriously." I cut her off gently. "They're not anonymous, they're just cowards." She sighed. "We'll mark the file, no further action needed." By Tuesday, 2 of our neighbors, Delgado and Mrs. Lang, got similar letters taped to their homes, identical formatting, no signatures. That was the mistake. Because fear works in silence, but once it starts to echo, people stop being quiet. That night, I held a small gathering in our backyard. Nothing formal, just a few chairs, lemonade, and a folder full of truths. Pauline came first, then Delgado, then the Besslers, people I hadn't spoken to in weeks. And one by one they told stories. Delgado had been fined for noise violations because his wind chimes disturbed HOA harmony. The Besslers were cited for hanging laundry on a private clothesline. Lang's water usage was audited. After she missed a landscaping fee. Pattern after pattern, every one of them scared into silence. Until now. Emily pulled out her laptop and showed them the binder pages we'd copied, the audio files, the transfer papers. "This isn't just about Daniel," she said, calm but firm. "It's about all of us. They've used policy like a weapon, and we let them." Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Delgado said, "What can we do?" I looked around at the faces, some ashamed, some angry, all tired of hiding. "You don't have to yell, you just have to show up," I told them. "Thursday night, open forum. We bring this forward. We let the cameras roll. And we let Margot answer for all of it." Pauline raised her hand like she was back in school. "If they shut the meeting down before we speak?" Emily was ready. "Then we film it anyway, post it, stream it. Public opinion is louder than any gavel." They all agreed, quietly, one nod at a time. After everyone left, I sat on the porch, staring at the Sentinel. Its shadow stretched long across the lawn, same as it had for 50 years. It wasn't a tree tonight. It was a witness. Emily sat beside me, sipping lemonade like nothing had changed. But everything had. "We're not the only ones awake anymore," she said. I smiled. "That's what makes the storm worth it." "No," she corrected. "That's what makes it end." The morning of the meeting, the air felt different, still almost reverent, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. Emily stood by the kitchen window, staring at the sentinel tree again. She didn't say anything, just watched it sway, slow and steady, like it always had. There was comfort in that rhythm, something permanent in a world suddenly full of shifting loyalties. "We ready?" she finally asked. "Past ready," I said. We had triple-checked every file, every clip document backup drive. The folder on Emily's laptop was named Final Strike _V1. She renamed it that morning to Final Strike _Victory. Pauline called mid-morning. "Margot added 2 new agenda items," she said, "both labeled time-sensitive enforcement matters. She's planning something, probably trying to run out the clock." "Let her," I said. "All we need is 5 minutes and 1 working mic." That afternoon, I met with David Tran one last time. He looked like a man sitting on dynamite, grinning but grounded. "She's lawyered up," he said. "Some guy from a mid-tier firm downtown. But here's the twist. He's already got a conflict of interest. Used to represent Delgado's HOA years ago. I filed the complaint this morning." I chuckled. "So even her defense is on shaky ground." "She's got money and connections," David said. "But you've got something better. People who finally stopped looking away." Before I left, he handed me something, a printed copy of the story draft. "The Beneath Powers Power Structure of Lakeside, How an 08 Built Its Kingdom on Fear." Below it, a subheading with exclusive evidence from the Rourke family archive. I didn't expect the emotion that hit me. It wasn't pride, it was relief, that someone else saw it too, that we weren't imagining the weight of what we carried. That evening, Emily and I walked the neighborhood, quietly, deliberately. Mr. Delgado gave us a slow thumbs up from his porch. Mrs. Lang waved a folder of her own. Even the Besslers had printed handouts. People weren't just attending, they were preparing. At home, Emily laid out her final slides. The first one was a timeline. The second, photos of the forged zoning forms. The third was a video clip, Margot's voice, caught on the cassette tape from my grandfather's box, saying, "The Rourke plot's untouchable unless we rewrite Section B." It was the nail. I stared at it longer than I should have, then asked, "You nervous?" "About what?" "Standing up there, saying what has to be said." Emily didn't hesitate. "I'm not the one who should be nervous." We left for the meeting early, parked at the edge of the lot. The clubhouse lights were already on, spilling across the pavement like stage lights before a play. You could feel it. Something was coming undone. Inside, the seats were nearly full. More residents than I'd ever seen, some dressed like it was church, others in t-shirts and work boots, real people, fed-up people. At the front, Margot stood tall behind the podium, flanked by Colin and 2 other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She spotted us as we walked in. For the first time since this started, she didn't smile. Pauline sat 2 rows from the front. When we passed her, she didn't speak, just nodded. Not nervous, not apologetic, ready. As we took our seats, Margot cleared her throat. "We'll begin tonight's meeting with several urgent matters," she said, her voice crisp. "Given the nature of current disruptions, the board reserves the right to restrict comment time." Emily leaned over and whispered, "She's about to realize how little control she really has." I whispered back, "Let her speak, let her dig." The first 30 minutes dragged, updates about landscaping costs, mailbox replacements, irrigation repair schedules. Margot was stalling, smiling too hard, drowning in protocol. Then came the moment. "Next, we open the floor for resident commentary," she said, already flipping to the next page, like she expected silence. I stood, and the room fell quiet. I stood, and the room hushed like someone had hit mute on reality. Margot didn't look up right away. She was shuffling papers she didn't need to shuffle, stalling, clinging to order, but she couldn't ignore it, not with half the neighborhood turning to face me. "I'd like to speak," I said. 3 minutes, she replied without meeting my eyes. "That's all I'll need." Emily stood behind me, holding the flash drive. Pauline sat 1 row over, fingers clasped, lips pressed tight. Even Colin seemed tenser than usual, his jaw grinding as he leaned forward like he was waiting for a storm he couldn't predict. I turned to the crowd. Some of you know me, some of you just know the violations you've received since I moved in. Tonight, I'm here to tell you the truth, not just about me, but about this board. I took the drive from Emily and plugged it into the projector laptop. The screen behind Margot lit up. Slide 1, the timeline. This isn't a theory, this is documentation. Proof that this HOA under Margot Bellamy and Colin Drexler has systematically targeted residents to seize property. Gasps, murmurs, people leaning forward. I clicked to the next slide, the zoning document with forged signatures, then the payout spreadsheet, then a screen capture of Collins LLC tied to the proposed Rourke parcel transfer. Margot's voice cut in, "This is defamatory." "No, this is evidence," I said, cutting her off. "You'll have your say. Right now, I'm using mine." Next slide, the audio clip. Her voice, grainy but clear. "The Rourke plot's untouchable unless we rewrite Section B." The crowd reacted, shock, then fury. I let it hang for a moment, then clicked one last time. On screen now was a photograph, my grandfather under the sentinel tree, holding a hand-carved sign that read, "This land stays ours." I turned back. He fought to keep this place honest, and now so have we. You tried to erase families, but families don't disappear, they endure. The room exploded. Some people stood, others clapped. Pauline rose slowly, then walked forward, past Margot, and stood at the podium. "My name's Pauline Mercer. I was part of this board for 20 years, and I stayed silent when I should have spoken." Her voice trembled, but only for the first few words. "Everything Mr. Rourke said is true, and I have the meeting notes and email logs to prove it." She opened a manila folder and dropped it on the table in front of Margot. Colin stood up suddenly, like he was about to make a scene, but this time, 2 off-duty officers from Nest stepped forward from the back row, quiet, professional, present. Colin sat down. Margot looked around the room and saw what I saw, no fear, no more submission, no more clipped smiles and silent nods. She tried to speak, twice, but her voice cracked. "This meeting is adjourned." "Not yet," said Emily, stepping forward. She clicked one final file, a live feed. David Tran on screen holding a microphone. "Breaking story. Lakeside Residential HOA accused of fraud, land theft, and falsified enforcement records. A full report drops tomorrow." The crowd turned as one, and Margot Bellamy walked out. Not a word. Just the click of heels and the end of a reign. 3 weeks later, we got the official call. The lawsuit had settled, 7 figures, confidential on their end, but not on ours. Colin was forced to resign. Margot, after a short attempt to deny everything, retired for personal reasons. Pauline was voted interim chair with full community support. The board would be restructured entirely under third-party oversight. And our land? Untouchable. Emily and I didn't celebrate with champagne or headlines. We had root beer floats under the porch light, the same one I'd rewired with Grandpa years ago, the same one we left on when the fight felt darkest. At dusk, we walked out to the sentinel tree. Beneath its base, the lockbox still sat, now filled with newspaper clippings, drive backups, and a small wooden plaque Emily made herself. It read, "Truth lives here." She placed it by the roots. Quiet, gentle. "Think he'd approve," she whispered. I nodded, the breeze catching just enough to rustle the branches like a thank you. This whole thing didn't start with war. It started with a rose bush, a fence, and a family legacy worth defending. It started with people who forgot that power has limits and ended with people who remembered how to use theirs. I didn't want to fight, but I wasn't about to let my daughter grow up thinking silence was the same as peace. This home stands because we did. And it always will. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it stands tall, like a tree that never bows. Have you ever faced off against a petty HOA or fought back when someone tried to silence you? Drop your story below or tell me where you're watching from. Let's make sure these stories don't stay buried.